So, in all of my seasons being an ordained minister, giving the Sunday sermon has simply been the most difficult task of each and every year, but not this time. Today, this year, in my very soul, the spirit of Easter couldn't be any clearer than if you and I were there at the tomb on that resurrection morning beside Mary Magdalene, and we were feeling the light of that brand new day on our skin and our face. And the question becomes, what makes this year so much different than all the other years that I've had the honor of preaching? One of the reasons is because we've been following the Gospel of Matthew. And I can't speak for you, but I feel like Matthew has made it so clear about who Jesus is, what his ministry is about, and what he wasn't about. But more than that, this year, ministering beside you with our hands wide open has perhaps been the most beautiful experience in my entire life. Emmanuel, United Church of Christ, you are absolutely amazing. And it has been such a joy to watch this year how every day, every week, every month, you are embodying the gospel and the message and the very meaning of what the resurrection of Jesus Christ is all about. You have not been afraid. You have not fallen backwards because of fear, and you have been filled with so much joy. You have all expressed gratitude. You have all found a way to express radical greetings to neighbors and strangers and to people within the community, and you have been able to show to others just what Christ is all about. Have there been reasons in the past year for us to fear? Yes. Have there been moments in the past year that have shaken us to the core of our very being like an earthquake? Yes. Have there been reasons to doubt? Yes. Has there been death and sadness and incredible loss within our congregation? Yes, yes, and yes. And yet, you are still here. I am still here. We are all still here. And the question becomes why? Why are we still here? Why are we still a congregation that is able to learn with integrity, that we're able to worship with integrity, and that we're ministering with integrity? Because we know who Jesus is, and we have all had an experience in the past year of the risen Christ. And the question becomes, who is the Jesus that God raised? Who is the Jesus that God dared to resurrect? Well, since January, because we've been following the Gospel of Matthew, we've discovered that the Jesus that God chose to raise was the Jesus who was born into a perfectly imperfect family in which he had ancestors that were strong women like Rahab and Ruth and Tamar, who did whatever was needed to keep the blessing going. We learn that the Jesus who God raised is the Jesus who taught us what it looks like to be accountable to God, how to face temptation, and how to pray for our daily bread. The Jesus who was raised by God is the Jesus who said to the brokenhearted, who said to the teary-eyed, who said to the gentle spirits, they are blessed because God comforts them. The Jesus who was raised by God is the Jesus who shook our world and had the daring audacity to challenge us to be uncomfortable, to care for people we will never meet. People in Somalia and Haiti and Cuba and Biloxi and the Philippines. The Jesus that God raised is the Jesus who trusted that we were smart enough to think on our own. The Jesus who taught us in parables that we had to wrestle with, parables that we hated, parables that we actually had to think and do the work ourselves. The Jesus who God raised is the one who came into our lives with absolutely no weapons in his hand, who came into our lives humbly and said to each and every one of us that we are all worthy of heaven because we have cared for others, we have visited others, we have reached out to others. It is Jesus who had the very audacity to look at us and say, do you want to be made well? If so, then pick up your mat and walk. And not only did we walk, this year we have run, we have danced, we have skipped, and you know what? Yes, we have fallen, but get this. Each time we have fallen, we have gotten back up and we have lived. Amen. This is the Jesus that God raised on Sunday morning. It wasn't a minister who sowed fear. It wasn't a politician who sowed hate. It wasn't a mogul who liked to divide people. It wasn't a governor who bans thought and learning. The person that God raised is the person who dared to dine with the sinners, who held hands with those the world hated, and who spoke up for the bodily autonomy of women. And Jesus did this all without a spear, without a sword. He didn't even have a shield to protect himself. Jesus did this all without taking a bribe or lying or backtracking a single word of his witness. So what is the resurrection in 2023? And why has it been so easy for me to preach about it this year? Because in 2023, it's become so clear that the resurrection is God's yes to a world that wants to say no. That in 2023, the resurrection is God's freedom to a world that literally wants to take all of our rights away. In 2023, the resurrection is God's daily bread in a world in which eggs now cost $6 a carton. The resurrection in 2023 is God's soft light of a brand new day when the world literally tried to end the week with darkness and desertion. The resurrection is where injustice falls in the face of God's quake, and the righteous get to stand tall, and they get to be secure, and they cannot wait to share the good news. Jesus is not dead. God's mission is not a joke. Jesus' care for the world is so great that not even a cross can stop the work of heaven, nor can a grave hold back the greatness of God. The God who creates, the God who sets free, the God who holds each and every one of us accountable, the God who invites us to love our neighbor just as much as we love ourselves. And love never, ever dies.
Amen.
And for that, I believe we can say, Amen.